On August 10, 1943, the USS Eldridge didn't just disappear from the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. According to dozens of reported witness accounts, it flickered out of existence, reappeared 200 miles away in Norfolk, Virginia, then returned to Philadelphia, all within a matter of seconds. But what terrified the Navy wasn't the ship's impossible journey, it was what happened to the crew. Some were found fused into the metal hull, their bodies merged with steel, as if reality itself had glitched. Others vanished entirely, never to be seen again. And a handful of survivors, those who made it off that ship alive, reported something so disturbing that the military allegedly classified it for decades. They claimed they had seen through the fabric of space itself, into something beyond our three dimensions, a place where time didn't move forward or backward, but existed all at once. They called it the Philadelphia experiment. But what if it wasn't an experiment at all? What if it was an accidental doorway? In 1955, theoretical physicist Albert Einstein died with unfinished equations scattered across his desk. He'd spent his final years obsessed with one impossible question. Could there be dimensions beyond the four we experience? Space, time, and something else. Something we can't see, touch, or measure, but that might explain every unexplained vanishing, every impossible appearance, every moment when reality seems to tear at the seams. Einstein never finished his work, but in 1919, decades before the Philadelphia experiment, mathematician Theodore Kaluza had already proposed something terrifying, a fifth dimension curled up so tightly within our universe that we move through it every second of our lives without knowing it exists. And if Kaluza was right, if this dimension is real, then perhaps it isn't just empty space. Perhaps it's a bridge, a portal, a doorway between worlds, or between versions of our own world. Since 1945, over 1,000 ships and aircraft have vanished without a trace in the Bermuda Triangle. No wreckage, no distress signals, no bodies ever recovered. In 1918, the USS Cyclops disappeared with 309 men aboard, leaving behind only one chilling detail. The ship's final radio transmission cut off mid-sentence, as if the operator had been ripped away from the equipment in an instant. In 1963, Flight 19, a squadron of 5 military aircraft, vanished during a routine training exercise. The last communication from the lead pilot was a single, panicked sentence. "Everything looks wrong. We don't know where we are." Then silence. These aren't isolated incidents. They follow a pattern, occurring in specific locations where compasses spin wildly, where instruments fail, where sailors and pilots report the same eerie phenomenon, a sudden fog that appears from nowhere, and the unmistakable feeling that they've slipped into somewhere else, somewhere that shouldn't exist. And according to a growing number of physicists, these locations might not be random at all. They might be the thin places, the weak points in our reality where the fifth dimension bleeds through. But what happened in 2006 proved that you don't need to be in the Bermuda Triangle for reality to break. You just need to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. If you want to uncover more mysteries that exist beyond the veil of our reality, subscribe to Dark Dimensions X and hit the bell button, because what we're about to reveal next will change everything you thought you knew about the fabric of existence itself. The highway beneath Carol Chase McElhenney's car vanished in the middle of the afternoon. Not crumbled, not collapsed, it simply ceased to exist, replaced by a dirt road that hadn't been there for over 70 years. And when reality snapped back into place, her watch had stopped, frozen at the exact moment the impossible began, October 21, 2006. Carol and her husband were driving through a familiar stretch of highway near Dayton, Nevada, a route they'd taken hundreds of times before, But on this particular afternoon, the asphalt beneath their tires disappeared entirely. The modern highway was gone, replaced by a dirt road they'd never seen before. The landscape shifted. Buildings that had stood for decades were gone, replaced by older structures, some that looked like they belonged to another era entirely. Carol's husband slammed the brakes, but the car kept moving forward, as if being pulled by an invisible force. Then, just as suddenly as it began, reality snapped back. The highway reappeared. The buildings returned. They were exactly where they should have been, but Carol's watch had stopped. Frozen at the exact moment the road disappeared. When they reported the incident, investigators discovered something chilling. Carol wasn't the first. Dozens of people had reported nearly identical experiences on that same stretch of highway, all describing the same sensation, that they had briefly slipped into a different version of the world, one that existed in a different time. These events have a name: time slips, and they've been documented across the globe for over a century. In 1901, two English academics, Charlotte Ann Moberly and Moberly-Jourdain, were walking through the gardens of Versailles when they claimed the world around them transformed. The tourists vanished. The modern pathways became gravel, and standing before them were people in 18th century clothing, moving and speaking as if they belonged there. The women later wrote a book detailing their experience, and despite intense scrutiny and attempts to debunk their story, no one could explain what they had seen or how they had seen it. In 1996, a couple driving through Bold Street in Liverpool, England, reported stepping out of their car into what appeared to be the 1950s, complete with vintage cars, old storefronts, and people dressed in period clothing. The experience lasted only minutes before snapping back to the present. Security cameras in the area captured them entering a bookstore that had closed decades earlier. But here's what makes these cases truly disturbing. In every single documented time slip, witnesses report the same physical sensation: a sudden pressure in their ears, a feeling of being pulled sideways through space, and the unmistakable sense that they had moved not forward or backward through time, but perpendicular to it. In 2011, physicists at CERN began detecting anomalies during high-energy particle collisions, micro-events where particles seem to disappear for fractions of a second before reappearing, as if they had briefly exited our observable universe. The lead researcher, Dr. Sergio Bertolucci, made a statement that sent shockwaves through the scientific community. He suggested that these particles might be slipping into extra dimensions that exist right alongside our own, separated by a barrier so thin it can be pierced by nothing more than energy and velocity. And if particles can cross that barrier, what else can? Albert Einstein received a letter in 1919 that would haunt him until his death. German mathematician Theodor Kaluza had found something buried in Einstein's own equations, proof of a fifth dimension, hidden in the mathematics of reality itself. And when Einstein checked the calculations, searching desperately for an error, he found none. The dimension was real. Kaluza's discovery was impossible to dismiss. The math was perfect, too perfect. It suggested that beyond the 3 dimensions of space and 1 dimension of time that we experience, there exists another dimension, one so small, so tightly curled upon itself that we pass through it constantly without ever knowing it's there. But here's what terrified Einstein about Kaluza's theory. If this dimension exists, it isn't empty. It's a space where the laws of physics, as we understand them, completely break down. A place where cause and effect, past and future, here and there, none of it applies. And if you could somehow expand that dimension even slightly, you wouldn't just create a doorway to another place, you'd create a doorway to every place, every possible timeline, every parallel reality, every version of the universe that could exist. 5 years later, Swedish physicist Oscar Klein refined Kaluza's theory, proposing that this fifth dimension is compactified, compressed into a space smaller than an atom, coiled around every point in the universe like an invisible thread woven through the fabric of reality itself. The scientific community largely ignored their work for decades. It was too strange, too abstract, too impossible to test. But in 1984, everything changed. Physicists working on string theory, an attempt to unify all forces of nature into a single framework, discovered that their equations only worked if the universe contained not 5, but 10 dimensions. And according to their calculations, these extra dimensions aren't just mathematical abstractions. They're real, physical spaces that exist parallel to our own, separated from us by an incomprehensibly small distance. In some interpretations of the theory, these dimensions don't just exist alongside ours, they connect different universes entirely, acting as bridges between realities that should never touch. In 1998, physicists Nima Arkani-Hamed, Savas Dimopoulos, and Gia Dvali published a paper that sent shockwaves through the scientific world. They proposed that gravity, the weakest of all fundamental forces, is weak in our universe because it's leaking into extra dimensions. That somewhere, right next to us, separated by a distance smaller than we can measure, there are entire dimensions of space we cannot see, cannot touch, cannot enter, except under very specific conditions. Conditions involving massive amounts of energy, intense gravitational fields, or precise geometric alignments. The kind of conditions that might naturally occur on certain places on Earth. Places where the magnetic field is unstable, where compasses fail, where ships and planes vanish, where people report slipping through time itself. In 2008, when the Large Hadron Collider came online, one of its primary missions was to search for evidence of these extra dimensions by detecting particles that momentarily vanish from our reality. And they found something. Micro black holes forming and collapsing in fractions of a second, doorways opening and closing faster than the human eye can perceive. But what happens when one of those doorways doesn't close? In December 1970, Bruce Gernon was piloting a small aircraft over the Bermuda Triangle when he flew directly into a strange, tunnel-shaped cloud formation. He described it later as a vortex, perfectly circular, with walls that seemed to pulse and rotate around him. His instruments went haywire. His compass spun uncontrollably. And then, for reasons he still cannot explain, time collapsed. The flight from Andros Island to Palm Beach should have taken 75 minutes. Bruce landed in 34. He had traveled over 100 miles in less than half the expected time, with no increase in airspeed, no tailwind, and fuel consumption that didn't match the distance covered. But what haunted Bruce wasn't the impossible flight time. It was what he saw inside that cloud. A gray, featureless void where the sky, the ocean, and the horizon all disappeared, replaced by a space that felt, in his words, like being inside a dimension that wasn't meant for human eyes. When he emerged, his co-pilot was unconscious, and Bruce himself suffered from disorientation and memory gaps that lasted for weeks. He wasn't the only one. Over the years, others who have flown through similar formations in the triangle report the same experience and the same aftermath. Vivid nightmares of being in two places at once, the unshakable sensation that they left something behind in that void, or worse, that something followed them back. In 1975, a Japanese fishing trawler named the Kaiomaru No. 5 was operating near the Devil's Sea, an area off the coast of Japan with a disappearance rate rivaling the Bermuda Triangle. The crew reported seeing a glowing fog bank approaching their vessel, and then, according to the sole survivor who was rescued 3 days later, the ocean beneath them opened up. Not a whirlpool, not a wave. He described it as a geometric tear in the water itself, with edges that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. The ship was pulled downward, but not into the sea, into something else. The survivor claimed he saw his crewmates frozen mid-scream, suspended in a space where movement had stopped entirely. He managed to grab a lifeboat and was ejected back into normal reality, but when rescue teams found him, he had aged 7 years in 3 days. Medical tests confirmed it: his cellular degradation, his bone density, his tissue samples, all corresponded to a man 7 years older than he had been when the ship departed. He died 2 months later, still insisting that he had been trapped in a place where time moved differently, where all moments existed simultaneously. And then there are the ones who vanish and return, but not as themselves. In 1954, a man arrived at Tokyo International Airport carrying a passport from a country called Taured. The country didn't exist. When officials questioned him, he became agitated, insisting that Taured had existed for 1,000 years, located where our maps show Andorra. He had business documentation, currency, and driver's licenses, all from Taured. He was placed in a hotel room under guard, with officers stationed at the only door. By morning, he had vanished from a locked room on the 15th floor. No trace, no explanation, no evidence he ever existed, just an empty room with a locked door. And every document from Taured, the passport, the currency, the business papers, all gone from a sealed evidence safe, as if reality itself had erased him. They finally did it. In 2019, physicists at the University of Maryland created something that shouldn't exist: a time crystal, a structure in perpetual motion that violates the fundamental laws of physics by breaking time symmetry itself. It was proof that objects can exist outside the normal flow of time, and the lead physicist, Dr. Norman Yao, made a statement that barely registered in mainstream media but terrified everyone who understood its implications. We've proven that structures can exist outside the conventional flow of time. The question now isn't whether other dimensions exist, it's whether we've already been interacting with them without realizing it. Because in the fifth dimension, time doesn't flow in one direction. It exists as a landscape you can theoretically navigate, moving between moments the way we move between locations in three-dimensional space. That same year, the Pentagon quietly declassified decades of UFO encounter reports through the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. Buried within those thousands of pages was a pattern that investigators couldn't explain. In multiple encounters, military pilots reported objects that appeared and disappeared instantaneously, not moving faster than radar could track, but literally ceasing to exist in one location and reappearing in another with no measurable transition. In several cases, the objects were observed simultaneously in 2 locations hundreds of miles apart, as if occupying multiple points in space at the same moment. Former Navy pilot Commander David Fravor, who encountered one such object in 2004, described it as moving like it wasn't obeying the laws of physics, like it existed in our space but was being controlled from somewhere else. Pentagon analysts noted something disturbing in their final report. These objects exhibited behavior consistent with theoretical models of higher dimensional movement, appearing and disappearing from our three-dimensional reality by moving through a dimension we cannot perceive. Today, dozens of research teams across the globe are actively searching for proof of the fifth dimension. They're using particle accelerators, gravitational wave detectors, and quantum computers to probe the edges of reality, looking for the seams where our universe connects to something beyond. And they're finding anomalies, tiny, unexplainable fluctuations that suggest our reality isn't as solid as it appears. But here's what keeps these scientists awake at night. If the fifth dimension exists, if it truly is a bridge between parallel universes or alternate timelines, then every mystery we've explored isn't evidence of something that happened, it's evidence of something that's still happening, right now, in locations scattered across the Earth. Doorways that open and close according to conditions we don't yet understand. And the people who vanished, the crews of ships, the passengers of aircraft, the travelers who slipped through time, they didn't die. They didn't cease to exist. They crossed a threshold we were never meant to cross. They're still out there, somewhere in the space between dimensions, trapped in a place where our laws of reality no longer apply. And the most terrifying possibility of all? That one day, intentionally or accidentally, we'll figure out how to open those doorways permanently, and we'll finally discover what's been waiting on the other side.